Julie, this is a little like a tennis match. I think on the ellipse, it seemed like, okay, Kamala Harris has a kind of the momentum. Then Biden's garbage comments caught fire. It goes back and forth, back and forth. How does Harris take these remarks this time by Donald Trump and turn them back to her advantage?
Well, the good news is Joe Biden's not on the ticket, so you don't have to worry about Joe Biden's comments. But Donald Trump is. And there's 4 years, potentially, God forbid, or potentially longer, because he's not particularly into the Democratic with a small d mindset of Donald Trump being around. And that's exactly him doing something to women, whether they like it or not, is why he owes E. Jean Carroll $90 million. It's exactly why countless women, more than a dozen, have come out and said that he sexually assaulted them or harassed them. It's why consistently women in places like Texas and Georgia and a third of this country live under Trump abortion bans, where whether they like it or not, when they have a miscarriage, they can't help themselves because doctors are afraid to do anything to help them because of what Donald Trump put into place as president. All of this is something that people knowingly are either voting for or not voting for. Joe Biden, you don't have to think about Joe Biden 3 months down the road, but you'll be thinking a lot about Donald Trump and how he's going to impact you. Not just what he says, but how his words and his deeds as president and a potential future president are going to impact you. And that's something I think for people to really think about and consider before they vote Tuesday or even earlier than Tuesday.
Mark, I wonder what you make of the fact that Donald Trump says essentially his own advisors were telling him not to say this, not to talk about being a protector of women. And yet he said it first time at the MSG rally on Sunday. And then he goes even a step further, whether they like it or not.
They were giving him good advice, and there's a reason why they gave him that advice. I think this is actually a pretty big deal because it is something that so reinforces Harris's message, positive message on one side, and her negative message about Trump. And in a race that is so close, I think, and I've written about the fact that I think that the two gaps, the gender gap and the enthusiasm gap, are going to make the difference in this race and will win it for Harris. And all this does is give them more ammunition to create more of a gender gap and more of an enthusiasm gap for Harris. I mean, it's not like they needed another reason, but this is just more powerful ammunition to get women out to vote, whether Trump likes it or not.
And Julie, even though Donald Trump was talking about immigration, not abortion, Harris has put out this abortion-related headlines along with his remarks, and I want to play that.
They said, sir, I just think it's inappropriate for you to say. I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. 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 I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not.
They're also talking about this. This is the latest reporting from ProPublica. A 28-year-old woman in Texas, she had complications during pregnancy. She died after doctors held off on treating her because they were worried about a state law against abortion. And I wonder when you juxtapose those kinds of stories, and that's not the first one, and many women have come forward, including standing on the stage of the Democratic National Convention alongside Trump. And an ad like that, what's the impact in the final 5 days of a campaign?
Well, listen, women don't want anybody, they don't want Donald Trump certainly protecting them, because his idea of protecting them is allowing them to die and to bleed out, as that poor woman did in Texas, as another woman did in Georgia, as countless women almost did since Donald Trump decided that he was going to help the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade by putting Supreme Court justices on the court to do that. Listen, I have a husband. I have a father. I don't need either of them protecting me. I just need Donald Trump and all these other guys to get out of our way and let us do what needs to be done for ourselves, right? We're not shrinking violets. I'm not on the fainting couch. Most women are not on the fainting couch. Just leave us alone and let us do what we need to do to make our own lives better. And that means that, God forbid, if I am pregnant and I can't carry that pregnancy to term because something really bad is happening to my body, get out of my way. I will protect myself along with my doctor. But Donald Trump is preventing that from happening in a third of this country. It means that when women are going around trying to get equal pay for equal work, or they're trying to get some sort of just respect from their bosses, they're trying to not be harassed on the job, somebody like Donald Trump should not put them under NDAs, which is what he did both in the Trump Organization and also as president and certainly on his campaign. I mean, get out of our way. We will take care of ourselves. We're adults. We have our own agency. Just give it to us and get out of our way. And that's the opposite of what he's talking about doing here. It's the opposite of what he did as president. It's the opposite of what he will do if he's president. God forbid if he's president again.
Vaughn, the protector of women, whether they like it or not, remarks come as Trump was arguably riding high on Joe Biden's remarks about garbage, complete with a photo op. You know, he went out there, he had the vest, he kept the vest on. What's on tap for today?
Exactly. Actually, I think we've got a bite from last night at that Green Bay rally and his garbage truck gaggle that he did just before. Let's take a listen.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden. They don't think in terms of garbage, okay? They don't use terms like that, and it's a shame. And Joe Biden should be ashamed of himself if he knows what he's even doing. And she should be ashamed because she shouldn't let him do it. She's the vice president, but I assume she's acting as the president. She should never have let that happen. I hope you enjoyed this garbage truck.
Of course, Donald Trump is now heading out west here today. This is, we're told, going to be his last Western swing. And there was at one point in time where if a presidential candidate was coming out west, they'd visit Mark's lovely home state of Colorado. But that's not what's happening today. He's going to be making campaign appearances in New Mexico, which Donald Trump has consistently been polling well below Kamala Harris in. Yet he and his campaign are suggesting that they could expand the map with a massive victory. So he's going to be making a rally appearance in Albuquerque before making his way to the suburbs outside of Las Vegas and Henderson, Nevada, and then coming here later tonight where he'll join Tucker Carlson for an event here just outside of Phoenix and Glendale, Arizona. This for Donald Trump is going to be his last stop here in these key Sun Belt Western battleground states. And for Donald Trump, you know, there's a reckoning that like here in Arizona and several states, there are abortion rights measures that are running parallel on the ballot to his presidential election to codify abortion protection rights here in the state of Arizona. So for Donald Trump, there is a lot, and he is trying to put some focus back on the Biden-Harris administration, trying to use the remarks from President Biden the other day to turn the attention towards the idea that he is a unifier, not of just Republicans, but of independents and those who are disaffected Democrats. And for him, he is trying to make the case by going to the likes of New Mexico and Virginia as well, that he intends to expand the electoral map and change the MAGA movement and what American politics looks like today. And so far, what we see from these 7 battleground states is a close race here. And that is why you're seeing him coming and finishing this Western swing before focusing in the Midwest states and over in the likes of Georgia and North Carolina in those final closing days, Chris.
Thank you so much for that, Vaughn. You know, Mark, it's interesting. Maybe his campaign, maybe his advisors were against him making these comments, but then they kind of leaned into it. They issued a statement where they called it a big, beautiful garbage truck. And of course, he kept the safety vest on. And I want to play a little bit more of what Donald Trump said last night.
I have to begin by saying 250 million Americans are not garbage. Kamala and Joe call all of us, and them, even them, garbage. I call you the heart and soul of America. You are the heart and soul.
You've seen a lot on the campaign trail for his supporters and low propensity Republicans who don't like Kamala Harris, but maybe, just maybe, are looking for an excuse to vote Republican again. Is it effective?
Listen, I don't think there are really any undecided voters left at this point, Chris. And I mean, there's 2 things about that statement. One is that Joe Biden made the statement, not Harris. And that, you know, if it affects anybody, it really affects his base. It's not like it's going to do anything to undecided voters. And his base voters, they're committed. They're coming out anyway. The more important thing, I think, is this statement about women, because I think that there is a reverse kind of secret Trump vote going or effect out there right now. In 2016, Republicans were afraid to speak out publicly and say they supported Trump. I think there's something just the opposite happening this time, which is suburban Republican women who are afraid to say publicly that they're going to vote against Trump and for Harris because they're in largely Republican communities, Republican husbands, what have you. There's just a lot of peer pressure. But I think the statement like Trump made last night is just more fuel for them to go very quietly into those Republican suburbs and vote for Harris.
I've heard some other people suggest that, Mark. So I'm wondering, Julie, what you think about it, this idea that and we saw some of it right in 2016, people who don't want to state what they actually think. So if you live in a Republican community, if your husband or partner is going to vote for Donald Trump, you may not want to say it. But is that wishful thinking on Harris supporters' parts?
Look at the gender gap. Look at what we already know, right? Not just what's in polling, which, is debatable whether it's accurate or not, but what we actually see. There's a massive gender gap, and there's a massive amount of enthusiasm among women, not just Democratic women, but independent women and potentially some Republican women of coming out to vote in ways that their husbands or their brothers or anybody who are men are not. I will say this. There's a reason why Donald Trump keeps talking about this garbage stuff. He wants to lean into the past. He's desperate to run against Joe Biden. He's terrified of running against Kamala Harris because she represents change. She represents the future. And by the way, she's not the one calling the American people who don't agree with Donald Trump vermin. He is. He's calling people who are watching this show right now who may not be Trump supporters. He's calling you vermin. He's calling you the enemy of the people. He's calling the press the enemy of the people. He's calling you the enemy from within. He's saying that the United States, America, is a garbage dump or a garbage can. I mean, that's what he thinks of this country, and he's on the ballot. Not Joe Biden. You don't like what Joe Biden said? Congratulations, you don't have to vote for Joe Biden. But Kamala Harris has never once denigrated his opponents the way he's denigrating at least 50% of this country that's not voting for him. And that's why he's so desperate to lean into Joe Biden. He wants to talk about the past. She wants to talk about the future.